Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and the challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a fantastic place to live, work, and play. I'm Christina Egan, your host. I want to start today with a special happy birthday message for WMPG. It is their 50th anniversary, and we are so excited at the Greater Portland Council of Governments to be partnering with WMPG in producing this show. Today, we're talking about the legislative session that just wrapped up, and we'll hear about what it means for the people in Greater Portland. I am joined by Senator Rick Bennett, who serves Bridgeton and Harrison and other rural towns in Androscoggin and Oxford counties, and Senator Jill Duson, who serves Portland and Westbrook. Rick is a Republican, and Jill is a Democrat, and they are both known for working across the aisle and towards pragmatic solutions. So we were really excited to have the two of you paired together today. So welcome, Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Christina. It's so good to be here. And I also want to add my congratulations to WMPG for 50 years. 50 years in our transient world is a long time, and I really congratulate the station.
Yeah, providing such a service to the whole region. And Senator Jill Duson, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here on this auspicious day, and happy birthday to you.
We get a little musical interlude. Thank you so much. We actually have this celebration happening outside the studio right now. There's a nice picnic and some music going on, so it's a celebratory moment. We welcome all of you who are listening to call in if you have a question for Senator Bennett or for Senator Duson. You can reach us at 780-4909. Again, that's 780-4909. We're going to dive right in. And Senator Bennett, I'd like to start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about, why did you want to enter politics? Why did you run?
Well, I think I have an aberrant gene that shows up every few generations in my family, but it was a while. I guess from an early age, I was very fascinated by politics, and I, like many people who get involved in Maine government at either the local or state level, you realize that it's tremendously accessible. I mean, all you have to do is raise your hand at an inauspicious moment, and you find you're elected to the school board in a lot of towns. And so, I just got interested when I was in college, and then found myself running for the Maine Legislature about 33 years ago, a third of a century ago, for the Maine House when I was a pretty young.
Must have been a baby.
I was 27 or something like that. 20. And I got elected and served a couple of terms in the House and 4 terms in the Senate, was president of the Senate, and then left public service. I focused on building my businesses and raising my kids with my wife, and and then in 2020 I decided that things are really we need a new kind of government. We need a new kind of politics. Actually, it's turned so toxic that I felt that I needed to lean back in and do what I can to build a better way of communicating and deliberating and legislating and making policy than what we have become. And I do think that I enjoyed working with people like Senator Duson, who shares that attitude that this is should be an inclusive process and not an exclusive one. So that's kind of my mission and my re-election here in my this tour of duty is to really focus on that, work in a bipartisan spirit. Compromise is not a dirty word, and just model problem solving, which is I think what people want. My rural district, then there are people who are very passionate on the polar edges, but most people want problem solving, and they want there are a lot of issues that affect people's lives on the kitchen table, discussions, and those are the issues that we really ought to focus on. And too often we're focused on these issues which drive wedges between people.
I just so appreciate you sharing that philosophy. It's something that we're seeing at the local level with the member cities and towns that I serve, that there's more and more polarization at the school boards and even at the councils and boards of selectmen. And there's so much that needs to be done that requires people to lock arms, even when they have some wedge ideological differences. So thank you for that, Senator. And Senator Jill Duson, you've been involved at the local level. You've served on school boards and on the city council and also as mayor of Portland. Tell us a little bit about what got you started and then what made you decide to run for the state senate.
Well, I was born by the river in a one-room shack, and then, no, just kidding.
Wow, I was like going to start like writing the Great American Novel here.
Now, I'm in my 40th year in Maine, and I see myself as a child of the civil rights movement. The adults around me were completely engaged in issues of housing and civil rights and access to education. When I was in elementary school, my parents and aunts and uncles and the adults were engaged in 2 years of demonstrations that resulted in desegregation of our schools in Chester, Pennsylvania. And I was one of the smart black kids bused across town to the white schools after that amazing undertaking by the adults in our community. I came out of that with this sense of trying to live up to the work that the adults around me had done that gave me access to school, college, law school, and engagement, that you have a responsibility to be a part of creating the community you want to live in and creating community for your kids and grandkids. So I come to the table with that attitude, and once here in Maine, I was asked by friends to consider running, and it took a while, but I did run, and I ran for school board, served on school board, served on council, retired, and then a couple years after my retirement from council and state government, I ran for Senate. Now, I was not successful my first run, but I learned a lot from that and ran again, and now I'm serving. For me, my priorities are for people to feel like they're heard, and not just heard, but that whatever results we come up with, things like the budget and housing policy and those kind of things, that folks who have come to the process and spoken to us about what they need, that they can see their fingerprints in the results.
That's great. And we're going to dive a little bit into now what your constituents really see as those bread and butter issues that you've been sent to the Senate to help address for the people of Maine. And maybe Rick and Jill, you've invited me to use your first name, so I'm going to transition to that. And Rick, you represent a rural area. Jill, our most urban area actually in the state. And I know that there are differences between what the different constituencies want and also some similarities. And I'm wondering, Rick, if you could share with us what you hear most from the people in your district about what they really would like to see, what's top of mind for them, and what would they like the government to be doing better?
Well, it's interesting. I think the issues are really shared between, whether it's more urban areas or rural. People are concerned about their futures and their kids' futures first and foremost. And they look around the world and they see lots of problem areas. And they see a volatile economy, uncertain job opportunities. I think people across the spectrum are threatened by unknowns, advancing technology, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, those sorts of things. Now, they don't necessarily address these concerns in those ways, but you can hear the concerns. They want to have a state of opportunity where their kids can come back if they wish and live, in rural Maine. They're concerned along those lines. They're concerned about the access to infrastructure, broadband, which I've worked very hard on as the prime sponsor of the bill that created the Maine Connectivity Authority, which is now spending hundreds of millions. Thank you. And it was a bipartisan initiative. Came out of the Broadband Caucus, which I co-chair, and that entity is now investing hundreds of millions of dollars, largely from the federal government, into to fitting in all access and affordable, high-speed, reliable access to the internet all across Maine, tucking in all the little corners. So that's an issue. Roads and bridges. Very big issue. Now, if you're driving around Maine today, you can see a lot of work is being done. One of the things that we did in the context of the budget, and I want to compliment Senator Brad Farron on the Transportation Committee for doing this, is really working hard at fixing our broken budgeting process for roads and bridges, because as we were very reliant on the motor vehicle fuels tax, which as cars and trucks become more efficient and as we're turning more to electric, those revenues are decreasing while the needs for the roads and bridges are increasing. So we made some changes, some significant changes, where we're now dedicating $200 million more per biennium out of the sales and use tax for motor vehicles that was going to the general fund is now going to the highway fund. So we've liberated some money that will then allow that. So basic infrastructure, education, healthcare, housing, big issues my people are looking at.
Yeah, and we live in interesting times, which is a very rapidly changing world with a lot of folks feeling insecure. Jill, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but I want to invite you to call in and tell us what's top of mind for you, for the senators to both hear from you. You can reach us at 780-4909. Again, I'm speaking with Senator Rick Bennett and Senator Jill Duson, and we're talking about what happened in the legislature and what's going to be happening in the legislature coming forward. So, Jill, Rick was just talking about broadband, infrastructure, housing. I know housing has also been a big focus for you. But let's start at a broader level. What do you hear most from your constituents in the Portland and Westbrook areas?
Well, I think it's primarily around affordable housing, and which we'll talk more detail later. And I think actually I want to reference parts of housing that we don't always talk about immediately, because folks are very much focused on the most visible parts of housing inequity, and that is homelessness.
Right. It has become very visible in the city of Portland recently, and actually in some of the surrounding towns as well.
Well, that's what I would point out, that the issue of hanging on to your home, of having a place that you can reliably stay in as you get older, as I get older, is a problem statewide. And it's something that's reinforced for me as I served in the Senate this past year versus the focus of solutions for the urban areas of the state. Homelessness is a problem all over the state. The challenge for elderly people, I'm going to be 70 this year, to hang on to their homes in the face of ever-increasing local taxes, in the face of changes in family structure, and our next generation of kids is many times not staying locally but moving out into the urban areas or even out of state in pursuit of education and jobs. Being home confident.
Home confident. I like that phrase. Yeah.
Is a major issue all across the state. And the other one I would mention is health and access to health care and healthcare services is surprisingly a issue in the city when we talk about opioid addiction and other issues. But healthcare in the rural parts of the state is also an issue.
So let's turn to the budget and what happened in the last legislative session. And Rick, you explained a little bit about the structural fix that you and others made to the transportation budget, which, we know that it's been underfunded for a long time with a declining gas tax revenue source, and trying to change and diversify the funding sources is a major step forward for transportation. What are some of the other pieces of the budget that either helped with broadband, helped with housing, helped with health and human services, or anything else that's top of mind for you that you both feel, or at least one of you feels, is a really important thing?
Go for it.
Well, there was a lot of money spent in the budget. I mean, a record amount of money.
So much coming down from the feds.
A lot, just billions, literally coming from the federal government. And it was a real opportunity, I think, to make some structural fixes, because I don't think we're going to see these kinds of monies created, which unfortunately I think they really were by the federal government just created, and that has exacerbated our inflation issue. But what we did, and the governor put forward a huge spending. I mean, if you look from the previous biennium to this biennium, it's about $2 billion more in spending.
Which, to start with, our base budget is
like $8.5 billion, and
Yeah.
now it's going to $10.5 billion.
Yeah,
rough
it's a
numbers.
25% increase.
Yes, and this is a 2-year period, right? So it's not an annual increase of 25%, but it's a 2-year increase of that amount. It's a huge increase.
Yep.
So part of that is one-time fixes for things. The broadband investments over the last several years. It wasn't so much in this budget, but those monies are one-time investments. Some of the other issues with respect to housing were constructed as one-time expenditures. Parts of them will be ongoing, but there were large down payments on the problem, and so. I just want people to know that there was a phenomenal amount of money being spent, and it caused a lot of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle a lot of consternation about just the overall growth in spending, and the fact that there wasn't a lot of recognition for the needs of people to keep their taxes down. We did some fixes on the tax side. We did some improvements, particularly relating to retirement income. For older folks, and also helping young families with tax credits for dependents, which was expanded and made refundable. Those were good changes on the tax side, and so I voted for the budget. I was one of a couple of Republicans in the Senate because I wanted to, including the Senate Republican leader, who we negotiate in good faith, recognizing that the majority party and the governor, all Democrats, really were driving the bus, and we wanted to have our impact around the edges where we thought where it would be beneficial. We did that, and as a consequence, we voted for the budget, although there were lots of pieces in there that I wasn't wild about, and I'm sure the same's true for Senator Duson. It's a budget. You're spending $10 billion,
A lot of people's handprints on it. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And Jill, how about for you? What was your feeling about the budget that was passed, and what kind of impact it may have for Mainers?
Well, I'll tell you, I want to make sure I thank my constituents for sending me to Augusta to do the work. I entered the fray, not your usual freshman. I had served as chair and member of the Finance Committee here in Portland, the second largest public budget in the state. But to a great extent, the issues, how you actually put a budget to bed, that process and the relationship building that has to happen for it to work were very much the same. And I would agree with Senator Bennett. My Republican colleagues worked hard to put together a budget that we could all live with. I think across the aisle, folks were concerned about being able to sustain continuing services, be able to figure out how you accommodate the end of the big influx of funds that happened because of COVID funding and other emergency funding, how we then start reducing what we're doing or figuring out how we pay for what we're doing in other ways in anticipation of those funds not being available in the next cycle. The other part I would want to say is I really appreciated and respected the work that people did to help me to help me kind of drink from the fire hose, I guess is what they say. In my first session, it's not that usual for a freshman senator to be on appropriations. It's a very involved and time-consuming process. And so a lot of it was me learning how to balance the work, the time on the actual documents with the need to really be available to talk to and listen to constituents and from all across the state who have concerns about what's in that budget.
And I might just add here that Senator Duson and I, we are seatmates in the Appropriations Committee. There are 13 members of the 186 members of the legislature who serve on the Appropriations Committee. It is a heavy lift on time and energy and a lot of moving pieces there, and our work is never done. It's a kind of unique committee, but we're sitting here today like we sit in the committee.
So you sit next to each other in the
Yes.
committee?
She's on my left, I'm on the right, and we often lean over and make comments about our impressions about what is unfolding before us, and that's so we're comfortable in that setting, I think. But it is a
Well, that's good modeling
Yeah.
of keeping the discussion going, even though you're in different parties.
yes, very much so, and we do that well, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
I'm talking right now with Senator Rick Bennett and Senator Jill Duson, and you're listening to WMPG, the Let's Connect Greater Portland show. It's a show about the issues we face in Greater Portland and the movers and shakers that are leading the way. And I'm so delighted to have both Rick and Jill with us. If you'd like to ask them a question or share your thoughts about what's top of mind for you, just call in at 780-4909. Again, 780-4909. So let's talk about policy. You talked about money, but you also had some pretty big pieces of policy that came through the legislature. And Rick, I'll start again with you. What were some of the highlights for you of good things that got done?
Well, I like many legislators, I put in an array of bills, and so I focus on, well, what did I put in that advanced the ball in certain areas. I also serve, in addition to the Appropriations Committee, I serve on the Government Oversight Committee, and that committee has been doing important work, and some of the work that we've been doing looking at the child welfare system, which is broken in this state, and tragic deaths of too many kids involved who had state custody, were in state custody, or had been. We're working on that, continuing to work on that. Unfortunately, we haven't made as much progress as I'd like to see, but we're working in that area. I've healthcare issues. It's hard to find people to want to work in healthcare. My wife is retired recently as an occupational therapist, having most recently worked in home health. It's really a grinding business, and it's very difficult. Working conditions aren't great for a lot of healthcare workers. I had a bill in that came out of a commission I served on to amp up the penalties for violence against healthcare workers, which is a real thing in emergency rooms and elsewhere, where people go to the hospital to get served. They cannot be turned away, and some of them, because of mental illness or drug abuse or other reasons, they are committing acts of violence, and so it's a dangerous place, and you're already making a difficult job a lot more scary and tougher. So we passed that bill, which is good. I have to say, one bill which I feel very strongly about is, and we're here in Portland, to better connect my district with Portland. There's an old dilapidated rail system called the Mountain Division, and we passed a bill to take this dilapidated state asset and build a trail from the outskirts where the trail ends now in Wyndham, all the way through Standish, Brownfield, Baldwin, all the way to the Freiburg line, where it continues already to the New Hampshire line. That's going to present a lot of recreational opportunities for not only my constituents, but people around the state, people from Portland that can recreate safely on this new asset that's going to be built over the next 5 years. That was a huge, tangible thing that I'm looking forward to continuing to work on.
It's very exciting. We've had several folks on this show focused on trails talking about the potential of that new corridor and the Mountain Division being converted to a trail. I think it's going to be an amazing asset for our region. And Jill, how about for you? Were there some big pieces of policy that you feel really good about that came out of the last legislative session?
Yeah, I would touch briefly on infrastructure improvements, as Senator Bennett did, and there's an important piece in the budget the issues that we deal with go from wind power to culverts Now, I had not paid
Culverts,
much attention
meaning
to
the pipes
culverts,
under-
the pipes under the road that
Right.
direct the water around. One of
Which
the
are
members
not
have-
big enough for
they're
the
not
storm
big enough.
surges.
And they're failing.
Yes.
And it's the kind of day-to-day work that you need to do to maintain in order for everything that's built, literally built on top of that culvert, to continue to function. So that was an important piece that I learned a lot about.
Big deal for climate resiliency
yeah,
for us to be
absolutely.
able to manage all of the water. I mean,
Yes.
boy, June was quite a deluge.
Oh, my word. We'll not start talking about my gardens. Another big one. A lot of work was done on this through a commission in the last legislature, and then actual legislation came to this legislature on paid family medical leave. That was an important, really intense issue that both parties worked hard on, along with the governor's office. Finally came through with a compromise, and that was passed. The kind of startup money for paid family medical leave passed this session. Now, there's still a lot of work to do, but that's a very important bill and a very important piece of policy for folks, so that Mainers can, when there's an illness or issue at home, that they can actually take time to be able to do what they need.
So it's amazing how time flies on this
Oh,
show.
we're almost
So we're
done.
getting towards the end, and I want to make sure that we have a little time to look ahead. I know there's more to say on all of the different issues that you worked on, so apologies. But as we move to the next session, I know that both of you have some bills that were carried over that would help with one of the issues that I know the City of Portland has been talking to the Greater Portland Council of Governments a lot about, which is the arrival of new Mainers. And Rick, I know there's a bill that you've worked on with that would assign some responsibilities to DECD. Is that something that you're going to be working on the next session?
I expect to, yes. I mean, I put this bill in because it occurred to me, and this is even before the issue related to Sanford came out, where a lot of folks just moved to Sanford. And that is a bill which was basically to establish one person, one point of contact when a town suddenly gets an influx of people that are maybe new Mainers, they may be other folks, and they don't know where to turn. There's been no central place for a town to go. So they go to usually the towns that have dealt with it, which is Portland and South Portland. They call them up. Well, there should be a state resource dedicated there. I was really pleased to see that bill having been carried over. It was also the governor has, in the meantime, made an announcement that she's formed a group that will be presenting to the next legislature a fuller plan for the state in dealing with new Mainers in particular, but just displaced population. We need to know what the resources are. We need to see where the gaps are, and we need to make sure that at the municipal level, where services are often delivered, that those leaders, whether they're selectmen or town councils, they know where to turn.
Yeah, and you were talking about the workforce challenges in the healthcare industry, and we have a group of people here who can't work and need to be
that's
trained.
the other issue we dealt with.
And so in 30 seconds, Jill, I know you also have a bill that's to help create campuses of transitional housing around the state in order to kind of offer this centralized services. Is this something that you'll be working on in the next session?
I'll definitely be working hard on that with help and feedback from many of the two communities that I serve and several other communities around the region. I had the blessing and curse of knowing where to go to be able to talk to municipalities about what their priority issues were. I went to a regional caucus, actually convened by GPCOG, and asked, which direction, what if I want to put a bill in about housing, what's the elements that should be in there, and with their help, we did sponsor a bill. Many elements of it were included in the package put forward by the Special Housing Committee, but there are pieces held over.
Well, we appreciate your leadership, both of you, on this issue, and I want to thank both of you for joining today. It's been great to have you.
It's been great to be here. Thank you.